Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition, an epic edition, in fact, of Wrestling with the Future. I'm your host, Psychic Medium Angelo, joined as I am every week by the happy haberdasher, the smartest guy in the room, Dan the Man Sebastiano. Dan, how you doing tonight?
I'm great. This is one of the episodes you look forward to when you get into this business.
I look forward to any episode where I don't have to share it with Mike Messier or someone else.
Well, this is personal for me because, I started in wrestling as a historian, and it was the Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio show I listened to when I was a kid that got me into the wrestling history. So
no way.
I was psyched when Angelo told me who he had booked, so I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, yeah. I know Dan was excited about this. Well, without further ado, let's introduce our guest by way of saying Pro Wrestling Spotlight was the first notable radio program to peek the inside behind the veil, an inside look at the business. It was ahead of its time in many ways. A lot of people referred to this program as a virtual or electronic dirt sheet. It was the first of its kind, really innovative at the time. And the man behind this brainchild was the innovator, the originator, the guy I call the innovator and originator. His name is John Arezzi. He now releases classic episodes of his Pro Wrestling Spotlight on the Arcadian Vanguard network. So our friend Brian Last there and his fine team of guys, and they have done a remarkable job. And I want to tell you, John, they have done a remarkable job of preserving the history and the originality of that content to as close to as original as you can possibly get it. And it really is an amazing time capsule back in wrestling history. The show visited such luminaries as Bruno Sammartino, Scott Hall, Terry Funk, Paul Heyman. John will tell us a lot about Paul tonight, and many more icons in the business. In fact, this show made him an icon of the business, ladies and gentlemen. A man known by many names. He is called John Anthony, John Alexander. Some people called him John Arezzi. John, you are my guest. You are my friend. Welcome home.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here with you guys tonight. I spent the last couple of days listening to some of your past episodes and totally enjoyable. I'm happy to be here and open it up to whatever you want to discuss, anything you want.
Well, let's open it up with this. You heard me say in the introduction, you were one of the very first wrestling radio programs.
Yeah.
As far as I remember, and I think my history is pretty good. I think you go back to probably the first episode I'm aware of was probably April or May of 89-ish, somewhere around there.
April the 9th, 1989 was the first commercial episode of Pro Wrestling Spotlight on WNYG, Babylon, New York. I did start Pro Wrestling Spotlight actually in 1975 in college. So I broadcasted from the junior college I went to, Graham Junior College in Boston, and at that time I was already a wrestling photographer and a writer for all the newsstand magazines. So that's where it started. I had a 2-week run with George Napolitano on WNYG in 1985, but the owners threw us off. Because Captain Lou Albano was a guest, and
I heard that story.
We don't want this stuff on the station. But anyway, April 9th, 1989 was the first of the long run that we had.
Yeah, I actually heard that story about Lou. We could talk about that later if you want. It's interesting because in many ways, my career has paralleled a lot of the guests I've had. You are no exception. I actually started my career in television and radio, and the very first wrestling radio show I did was 1985, a commercial radio station in Philadelphia called WIP Sports Radio with a young man you might know. His name's Joel Goodhart.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Good friend.
Yeah. Joel, I was Joel's rotating co-host when Carmella was not available.
All righty.
And you remember Carmella was his co-host at the time. And we heard about this little show out of New York called Pro Wrestling Spotlight. And we thought, oh, damn, we got some competition now. I'm looking around 1989, 1990 is when I became aware of it, as far as how well you guys were doing. I mean, you guys were doing some numbers as far as listeners are concerned. You know, when people talk about numbers today, they talk in terms of ratings, but we're talking about people listening. And the one thing you did, you son of a gun, that we didn't think about at the time, you took damn phone calls. You took phone calls, and we didn't have the ability to do it, son of a bitch.
Well, that was a big part of the show. And
that was a big part of the show. Talk to me about how this guy, this fan, and I'm going to just say it the way it is, you bullshitted your way into people thinking you were a wrestler.
I bullshitted my way into the ring, yes, for a couple of forgettable matches.
Exactly. Talk to me about John Anthony. Where did he come from?
What, the ring name that I used?
Yeah, where did John Anthony come from?
That was John Anthony was my confirmation name.
Oh, okay.
You know, my name is John Thomas Arezzi. Confirmation name was the third, John Thomas Anthony Arezzi. It was also my uncle's name. So I just used John Anthony. I mean, I came up with it the day that I went to the tapings.
Yeah, and I'm Angelo Thomas DeCipio. That's funny shit.
There you go.
So you created just the name, or did you create an entire persona like a lot of people do in this business?
No, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I went in there. I was a photographer, like the last taping, you know, always shooting the matches there. I was always backstage anyway. Yeah. And I had gotten to know Ernie Roth, the Grand Wizard, pretty well. And
oh, sure.
And I was like, I talked to him, and I was like, listen, this was in late 77. I was in college. I was 20 years old, and I was like, I think I want to get in the ring. And he goes, why do you want to do that? You know, I was like, I just want to see what it's like. You know, I want to see what it's like. And he goes, and he talked to whoever he did, and he said on the January 10th tapes, you're gonna do it. You know. And then I showed up, and I saw Monsoon, and everyone had seen me around. I mean, so it was kind of bizarre in a way that I think I lost my mind basically to do this. And Monsoon comes out and he was like, you got your gear? I was like, yeah. He goes, where have you worked? I was like, I worked a lot down south, which I never did. And he said, heel or baby. I said, heel. And that was it. And I was really nervous because I was like, all right, now I'm going to do this. And I saw Ernie, the Wiz, and I was like, what's next? He goes, well, you know, you're working. I was like, well, can you find out who I'm working with? And he went to the back. And I was even afraid to go into the dressing room because I never was back there because I was always in the common area where we used to take photos of the guys. And he came out and he was like, Dusty Rhodes. I was like, oh.
You're working Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, so I go in the dressing room, and the guys are kind of looking at me cockeyed because, you know, they know I was a photographer. Savannah Sousa, they put Savannah Sousa with me to be in a handicap match because Sousa saw me and it was like, that's the photographer, that's the writer guy. So I was getting, you know, cross looks from the start. And McMahon, he didn't tell me, but he told Napolitano, he goes, I didn't know Arezzi was a worker. And George goes, I didn't know either. Because I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't tell nobody. And that was that. So I was told, you know, we were told we were going to go 4 minutes or whatever it was. And Dusty and I and Sousa, I mean, I never even knew how any of this worked before because I was never in the actual where they're talking about what's going to happen. So that was also the first time I heard all of that. And then we were talking about what we're going to do in the ring. And then sure enough, it's my time to get in there and go in and didn't know what I was doing. And got
there
Dusty.
There had to be some element of the jig is going to be up any moment as soon as someone recognizes me.
Yeah, well, I think I lost my sanity for a bit. I wanted to see what it was like, and at that point, I really didn't give a shit. To tell you the truth,
You know what? You say that, and Dan and I are going to talk about this too. You say you lost your sanity, but in moments like that, genius is born.
Yeah, okay.
Think about what I want you to think about the result of that insane, ridiculous act of passing yourself off as a trained wrestler. Would it actually parlay it? Dan, this is right up your alley, brother. Go for it.
I think it's funny because you tell the story of you bullshitted way backstage, and obviously you worked Dusty Rhodes, who's somebody that a lot of people from that generation never got a chance to. We've had guests on the show that have said that was one person they wish they could have worked with, and yeah. you lucked your way into it. But from what I understand, this kind of literal peeling back the curtain to get back there is kind of what really sparked a lot of interest in further pursuits. I was wondering at what point, having you said you worked a couple forgettable matches, your words
in one night. It was 2 in one night. I mean, I worked with Dusty. I got the shit kicked out of me because I stiffed him a little in the corner.
Oh no!
Thing, and then he threw Seuss out of the ring, and then he just whispered to me, "I got to teach you a lesson." And those bionic elbows were laying in there pretty hard on the top of my head, and I couldn't even go with a body slam, and it was a clusterfuck, and that was the end. And they put me in a tag team match on the second round of tapings, me and Joe Turco, against Chief Jay Strongbow and Peter Maivia, and I was told you're not doing anything. You stay outside the ring until the finish. Turco will tag you in, because the whole match was me trying to get tagged in, and he kept pulling him away, put him in a headlock, pull him away, slap me in the head, just messing with me. And at the end, I get thrown in over the top. Strongbow picks me up, throws me in the corner. Maivia gives me a headbutt. I go down, and Strongbow pins me 1, 2, 3, and that was it. And then I was supposed to work with Backlund in taping number 3, but after tapings 1 or 2, they just said, "You're done for the night. You're done." I got my $90, and that was that.
Yeah.
And then it was the ironic part, because 3 weeks later, at Madison Square Garden, taking up my position to shoot Bob Backlund, going up against the world champion Billy Graham the night he beat Billy Graham for the title. And I got pulled out of ringside, and they said, "You can't take pictures anymore." Because my picture was in the program that night against Strongbow. Napolitano took that, and they said, you worked on our taping 3 weeks ago. You
absolutely.
Can't shoot pictures anymore. And so I basically jobbed myself out of a job.
Yeah, you sure did. You sure did. And that was the time when kayfabe was very protected.
Yeah.
Oh my God, please. So now you started, obviously this goes back long before Pro Wrestling Spotlight and wanting to be a wrestler. You were a fan growing up. What was the first match you ever saw? Everybody remembers their first time.
Oh, I remember.
Was it Vince's product, or was it a Southern-based product?
You're talking about on TV or in person?
It doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, it was 1964.
Okay.
And I was a kid, and I was 7 years old. Mm-hmm. I was living in Brooklyn, New York, and my older sister, who passed away years ago, but she called me. She was like, "Johnny, come in here. I don't know what this is." She was watching TV. Yeah. And I show up in the living room, and there's 4 midget wrestlers chasing each other around the ring.
Oh, I
didn't know what it was, and there it was. I just sat down on the floor, and was just kind of mesmerized by it. And that night, Bruno Sammartino, they kept mentioning this guy Bruno's not here yet. Bruno's not here yet. He was supposed to work against Dr. Jerry Graham. And they put his cousin, Antonio Pugliese, in against Graham, and Graham was pummeling him, and all of a sudden there's a commotion, and a big, brawly guy just runs into the ring with suitcases. And it was Bruno. was like, Bruno's here. And he picked up the suitcase and hit Graham over the head with it. And there was blood. And then Ray Morgan, who was the announcer, went up to Graham after the match, was like, well, you know, it looks like you need a doctor. And Graham was like, I'm my own doctor. I don't need a doctor. And that was in 1964. I remember it like it was yesterday. And that's the first time I watched wrestling. And I didn't get to see it live until 71. 71, they had a law in New York. You couldn't go to the shows until you were 14 years old. So I never go to a live show until 1971.
Yeah, Madison Square Garden had that 14 rule.
Yes.
The only person I know of that beat that was Bill Apter.
Yeah.
Because Bill said his father knew the commissioner. So that was different.
Wow, that's cool. Lucky Bill.
Yeah. Bill told that story on the show. Yeah, we all remember our first time. Yeah, mine, and I've told it on the show before. My first was in person, 1966, Philadelphia Arena, Bruno versus Killer Kowalski. Under a hood.
Really?
Yeah, under a hood. He had just tore off Yukon Eric's ear. Mm-hmm. So he was banned by the Athletic Commission from wrestling as Killer Kowalski. But he could put a hood on and wrestle as the Executioner, which he did that night. But the purple tights and the lightning bolt, the purple and gold lightning bolt kind of gave it away. You knew it was Killer Kowalski.
Yeah.
That was my first match. So let's talk. You fast forward this. You're in college. You get this idea. Hey, you know, they're doing music. The college radio stations are doing news. I'm going to do something a little different. Who comes up with the idea to do this professional wrestling show on a college radio station?
Well, it was me. I mean, I auditioned for the college station with the idea of doing a pro wrestling talk show. And at that time, I had a bunch of interviews on tape because I was allowed backstage. I was shooting for all the magazines. Mm-hmm. And I won the auditions, the open auditions, where I handed the concept to the program director and the music director. And ironically, they were both wrestling fans. So they kind of liked it. And then the sports director hated wrestling. And he wanted nothing to do with it. But when the list came out of who was getting shows and who was getting air shifts, the sheet came out, and I saw a Pro Wrestling Spotlight, John Arezzi, 5 o'clock Saturday afternoon, and I was like, "Well, here we go," you know. Yeah. So that's what started it.
Beautiful, Dan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, you know, that they during any process, Angelo can tell you, having been at radio himself, you know, you hit that moment where you're like, this is working. You know, you know it's working. At what point did you, when you were doing when you first started with your shows, did you realize this is going to work? This is right?
Well, I was having fun with it. You know, I didn't know what it was, because the first few shows were scripted. I mean, I was so nervous that I wrote up the script, and then we had a closed circuit, like a phone number, and people started calling to ask questions about wrestling, the kids in the dorm. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's what kind of happened. And then, you know, the Grand Wizard, who was up in New England, and I was shooting some pictures for him because he started promoting. And so I started getting more guests, and the Wiz really helped. And so it just turned into something that was fun, with the exception of the sports director. His name was Lester Singleton. He was a little person, literally. Mm-hmm. And he just used to call up and berate me that wrestling's not a sport and this and that. And I had enough after a few months of this. And he called me on the air one day, and I was trying to be as polite as I could. And then when he hung up, under my breath, I just muttered, "Cocksucker." And I got thrown off the air for a few months. I got suspended.
You had a hot mic
over the air.
Yeah, he had a hot mic, folks. It went out.
It was a hot mic, and then that night, it was around Christmas time. At the dorm, there was a Christmas party, and I show up, and there's, you know, Lester, the little guy, and he says, "You called me a CS on the air? I heard it." He was drunk, and I never forget it. He was about 3 feet tall, and he had a Santa hat on.
Oh no!
And he started chasing me like he was going to attack me. So, and everyone, I didn't know whether to laugh or, defend myself,
Brother, that's a great wrestling angle. Are you kidding me? This guy didn't know it. He was a perfect wrestling character.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Builds up
Oh
heat.
my God.
Builds up heat backstage against a midget in a Santa hat. That sounds like something you'd see on TV today.
Yeah, crazy stuff. But the show ran for 2 years. And then I went to a 4-year university to get my bachelor's. I went over to a college called Emerson College in Boston, and I basically concentrated on just doing the sports for the TV station there, and that was after also I had got yanked from my photography seat because of me working. So I was at that point starting to segue out of wrestling. I had stopped going, and it was kind of, all right, I'm going to be graduating college. It's about time to move on. Hey, Dominic, you here? You guys are both Goombas, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
My nephew, Dominic DiBiase, is over here. Take a look.
Hi.
Hey, ¿cómo está, brother?
How are you?
How are you?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys.
I'm here in New York. Anyway, yeah, so that's what happened. I was like, I was done with wrestling, and I was concentrating on graduating with college and getting a job in sports. I wanted to work for the New York Mets. That was my dream.
Yeah, I heard you're a big baseball guy. Baseball guy. At what point do you say to yourself, you know what, this wrestling thing's got some legs to it, might take off a little bit?
What do you mean? Like, I knew I wasn't going to have a career in wrestling, just to show you how big of a baseball fan I am. The Mets are playing a simulated game. It's on YouTube right now, so I was watching that before the podcast. But I didn't have any intention on doing a career in wrestling, actually. I got to shut this off now. You see this?
Well, I don't know. We can watch the game if you like.
No, it's a simulated game. They play the Yankees this weekend, so that's the first exhibition.
There you go.
But what do you mean? As far as what?
Well, no, I mean, it's as far as you have this passion inside you. You're clearly a fan. Yeah. You clearly have some connections at this point. So it's not something that just goes by the wayside to make way for baseball. You're holding on to this.
But I didn't watch it. I wasn't, I'd watch it occasionally. I remember the Zbyszko-Bruno feud. I remember watching that. Sure. But, I mean, I really was concentrated on getting my career started. So I got hired by the New York Mets out of college. I went to the baseball winter meetings. Mm-hmm. And I worked for their minor league affiliate in North Carolina, in Shelby, North Carolina, and had made a lot of friends there. John Gibbons was my roommate, and Lenny Dykstra was on the team. And I mean, and then I went into a nightclub one night and heard a female singer sing. Her name was Patty Loveless. She was a big country star now, but but back then she was Patty Lovelace, the lead singer for a band called Straight Up, and I thought she was amazing. And after a while, I got to know her and quit my job with the Mets to manage her. So, I mean, my life in wrestling kind of just went away.
Yeah.
In the 80s. I mean, it just went away. I was in the music business from, 1981 really till 89, but I watched. I remember the Hulkamania explode. I remember, the Rock and Wrestling Connection is what kind of drew me back in.
Yeah.
With Cyndi Lauper, Captain Lou, and all of that stuff. And
John, how dedicated were you to the music industry? I know that you managed. I know you managed Patty, but you also managed a string of lesser known individuals as well. And I know that you produced some.
Yeah, I mean, my life has been a roller coaster of different things, and pretty interesting life, I guess. But the 80s were basically music. I had started a management company up in New York and had several acts, and a lot of them were not prominent. I was managing too many acts at one time. Yeah. I had some partners, and they really didn't know the business, but they, everyone had the dream to break an act. But I was very inexperienced when it came to the music business. And after several years, it just kind of went away. I mean, and then it went under one day because we had an opportunity to work with a band called the New Kids on the Block. And my partners were like, we have enough fucking bands. We don't need any more bands. I said, but this band is good. He goes, that's what you say about all the bands. You say they're all good.
New kids on the block.
They shut the business down, and I was like, what am I going to do now? It's 1989. It's at the end of 1988, rather. What am I going to do now? So that's when wrestling came back. That's when I said, I did the wrestling show in college. Maybe I could do a commercial radio show called Pro Wrestling Spotlight, and that's what I did.
So now, Dan, I know you want to pick up on this, but so you go to the lengths of assuming that you're getting a sponsor here. You're gaining some kind of airtime through sponsorship, or you're buying your own airtime. How's this working for you?
At WNYG, it was a place that I worked on and off for years, even while I was in the music business, radio station. But I went in there, and initially it was a revenue share. The old lady who ran the station, Mrs. Hornstein, and her husband, Saul Hornstein, we were going to share some revenue, and it wasn't coming in fast enough. So then she was like, well, you have to buy the time. And that's what I did. Okay. I brokered my airtime from the middle of 89 right through 96 when I left with all the other stations.
And that's pretty standard practice for especially back in the day.
Yeah, no one was paying you for a wrestling show. No one was.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was in some ways, it's actually pretty standard practice now because, radio is kind of a dying thing, then podcasts are where it's at now. Dan, go ahead. I know you wanted to follow up on that.
Well, I would just want to point out first the cameo appearance you had. That's how you know you're true to that part of the country when you have Dominic living in the house. Got to have at least one in the family, a nephew or a cousin, right?
Well, I live in Nashville. That's where I live. I'm in New York right now. I've been here. I have an apartment here in New York. In the house that my sister and Dominic live in, there's a basement apartment that I took over a couple of years ago so I could come up here as often as I want to and have a place to stay.
Yeah.
And I've been here much longer than I thought I would be because of COVID.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Then let me expand. You were talking about the getting into the business and obviously your airtime and your organization. With that was 88, 89, so that puts you like right around the Mega Powers era. That would have been the big thing in the New York region because you still had WrestleMania and everything. Mm-hmm. So I guess I want to look at that from the perspective of how. Let me think how to word this. How did that affect like who you targeted as far as your audience, your guests?
I got you.
Did you try and focus on the Rock and Wrestling Connection? Like, let me try and get your young fancy guys, or at that point were you more still focused on history? Let me try and get some of the older stars.
I didn't know what I was going to do when the show started. The first thing I did when I got the show, as I called the WWF. And I spoke to someone in their PR department. His name was Steve Planamenta. And ironically...
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Ironically, Steve was a kid who I met through one of my college friends who was a little boy who used to, like, follow me or, like, love the Fred Blassie fan club. And he was a little kid. Little Stevie is what my friend used to introduce me to him as. I met him once, and the kid was like, oh, John Arezzi. But then, here we are years and years later. I call the WWF, and he goes, John, this is Steve Planamenta, Bill Martin's friend. And I was like, oh, little Stevie. And he was like, no, Steve Planamenta. And I said, well, I'm starting this wrestling talk show, and I would love to take a meeting or have cooperation, what we can do together promotion-wise. And he goes, what are you going to do with the show? Are you going to be like that Rich Mancuso guy in New York that just exposes the business? And I was like, I have no intention of exposing the business. And he gave me a guest for my very first show, his Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. Nice. And so the show was totally going to be kayfabe. That's what the intention was. I wasn't going to tear no curtain down or expose anything. Mm-hmm. And then through my friend Georgianne Macropolis.
Georgie,
I asked her for show number 2 if she could give me Bruno's number and talk to Bruno because I'd love to have Bruno on. Sure. Not knowing how much Bruno did not like the WWF at the time. So I called Bruno up and I interviewing him on tape before the show. And he said a lot of bad things. And then I was like, holy
boy.
stuff. What am I going to do with this? So I called the WWF and I was like, listen, I got Bruno Sammartino coming on this week for this week's show. But he said some, pretty nasty things about you guys. And he goes, we're not going to air it, are you? I said, well, I think I have to, and that was the end of my cooperation.
Two shows?
It was one show. And I was.
Well, I mean, by the end of episode 2, the contract, the agreement was over.
It was done. I was done. I was.
Dan, remember these words. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Right.
Nothing's changed. It's exactly the same way now.
Yeah.
In fact, in many ways, it's worse. It's worse. So, you have to glean from when little Stevie Planamenta is now correcting you and says, no, it's Steve, you got to figure something's up. Okay. So now he's got a little juice under him. And now at the time, John, are you aware that little Stevie is a wrestling fan, or you're not aware, or you don't care?
No, I mean, you mean the Steve that I spoke to in the WWF, or
the Steve from here when he was a little boy? This little punk kid.
Well, he was a little kid who my best friend in college was like, my next door neighbor is a big wrestling fan and he knows who you are. Would you mind meeting him? And I was like, of course, So my friend lived in Austin, New York, and during a holiday, Christmas break or whatever it was, I went over and and said hello to Steve, and I gave him some magazines, and he was a little boy. He was a big wrestling fan, little boy. So, and then it wasn't until 15 years later that I reacquainted myself when he was Steve Planamenta at the WWF.
Yeah. So now you got this Bruno interview. It's in the can. You got to sit on it. You don't know what to do with it.
Well, I played it for the station management, and they said we wouldn't want you to air this as is because it could be subject us to some potential lawsuit.
Was it liable?
It was, it was like Bruno being Bruno back then. And so I called Bruno up and I was like, listen, there's, the first half of the interview was great. I said, do you mind if we recut the second half? And he goes, doggone it, why? Why do we have to do that? I was like, because there's, problems with lawyers and whatever. And he goes, I'll do whatever you want. So he graciously retaped it and still said some things, but not as heavy as he did in the original one. And that developed, for me and Bruno, it developed a friendship, which led to us doing many things together over the years.
Sure. Well, and in the interest of full disclosure, and I've talked about it on the show before, Dan knows, Bruno was a good friend of mine. Real good friend of mine, very dear friend. And I've had our buddies on. I should have reached out to you then, John, because we had a Remembering Bruno night. JJ was here. Davey Johannan was here.
Davey, I love Davey.
Oh, man. In fact, I spoke to Davey tonight. He's coming back next week. We're doing a show with Davey next week called Remembering the Territories.
I used to go to the Beach Boys. We went to a Beach Boys concert with him and his wife, and we were very tight back in the 70s. Me and his wife Kathy and Davey, and we socialized back then.
Oh, Davey's very good, very different. He lives about 20 minutes from me right now.
Yeah,
he's literally 20 minutes away. Interesting thing too. You're talking about living in Nashville. I spent 15 years in Tennessee. So if you have a chance to stay in New York, stay. Don't go back.
Well, I've been there 20 years.
Have you really?
Yeah, I moved to Nashville in 2000.
Explain to people who are unfamiliar this Italian Yankee soul. How do we survive? Why are you laughing at me, Dan? How do you survive down south with no gravy and no real bread and no pizza and
no bagels?
No, oh my God, are you kidding me? Everything is you say gravy to somebody and they're bringing you a bowl of this white shit. Oh my God. So talk to me about living in Nashville and Music City.
A job brought me there in 2000. I was in the music business when I got out of wrestling. That's when I changed my name to John Alexander in 1996. I couldn't take wrestling anymore. It had really fucked me up mentally and financially. And I had enough, and I wanted to turn the page on it and put it in the rearview mirror. So I changed my name to John Alexander. And I got a job at a local Long Island country radio station because I love country music because of Patty Loveless from years ago. And I started selling advertising, and 1 year goes by on Long Island. Then I get hired away by a New York City country station, Y107 FM. I spent a few years with them, and then I get a call asking me if I would move to Nashville to open the offices up for a TV network called Great American Country as their head of music marketing and national account development. So I took the gig because I had been visiting Nashville with the other jobs, and I liked it, and the cost of living was great, and it was a good place to hang your hat. And the job was great. It was a 6-figure job. It was more money than I'd ever made in my life. I mean, and I went down there, and every year was incredible for me. And then I moved my family down. My mom, my sister, my nephew. I mean, we all lived down in Tennessee. My mom had passed away, and then my sister and my nephew moved back to New York because they missed the culture, and they missed New York, and they missed the Italian people. But I had a job, and I stayed. But I love Nashville. I think now it's a little bit more challenging for me down there, just because I've left the music business this year. After being in it for 23 years, and I miss my family, and life is short, and COVID is here, and so I've been spending more time in New York than Nashville. I've been here, for 2 months almost, with my place empty in Tennessee. Yeah. So I have some decisions to make on what I'm going to do in the future. But Nashville's a great place. They don't have the pure Italian stuff, but it's a great place. And I was in the country music business, and everybody knew me as John Alexander there. I was really successful in what I did.
It's so interesting to hear your story because it parallels mine in so many ways. I wasn't going to make a living in Tennessee, as Angelo DeCipio. So I had to become Angel Diablo.
What did you do down there, Mr. Diablo?
Television and radio. My dear friends at the Gaylord Entertainment Center and Gaylord Media hired me on for some of their radio stations. I did a lot of their voiceover work. My voice can still be heard on some of their commercials.
He's blowing smoke at you, John. Angel Diablo was the #1 rated Chippendale in the Nashville Strip.
No, sir. He was the voice of Tennessee for.
Were you a WSM guy, or did you do any WSM work for Gaylord, or?
I did actually some work for the insurance company.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
The founders.
By the way, for people who don't understand, WSM literally stands for We Serve Millions. That's what it means. People think it's the call letters of it. Yeah, it is the call letters, but it means we serve millions. But no, I actually did quite a bit of voiceover work. I did a lot of wrestling stuff when I moved to East Tennessee. I was involved with a company there called East Tennessee Championship Wrestling. We've actually, Dan and I actually talked to Ron Fuller about the character that ran that group, a gentleman named Terry Landell. And you remember that conversation we had with Ron. Ron is a good friend of mine. But we did some work with East Tennessee Championship Wrestling, and Buddy Landell was a friend of mine, and of course Ricky and Robert. Ricky lives in Bristol, Tennessee. Robert lives in Florida, but they were dear friends. I did a lot of work in Tennessee. Mostly radio and television. That's primarily where I made my living, but wrestling was my hobby. I never relied on wrestling for my livelihood. Thank God. Had I, I'd probably be broke right now. So, Dan, go ahead.
Tough business.
Well,
It
let
is.
me
It's
let me ask you something,
merciless, John. It really is. It's a merciless business.
Very
It will
cutthroat.
eat your soul alive and spit it back out. Go ahead, Dan. I'm sorry.
Well, something I mentioned earlier, your work in radio and a lot of what you did was the reason I got so interested in the history of wrestling. I'll be 37 here shortly, so I mean I'm old enough to remember the territories, but I also had to watch the tapes, rent the tapes from the store to see like Memphis and some of the stuff I couldn't get on TV. But I want to get off wrestling for a second, have you expand on something if you don't mind me asking. You talked about your history in country music. I think that's an interesting question. I'm curious because you mentioned you got out of wrestling in the late 90s, right around mid-late 90s, you said, right around when wrestling started changing. The wrestling we all grew up with, well, I grew up with, and I'm sure you guys, in later years, it started changing to the more modern, what we see now, where it got away from being wrestling and more into the stunt show. And then you mentioned getting out of the music business right around the last few years where country music has started evolving from your Garth Brooks and that Kenny Rogers and what I grew up listening country music, and now it's more your pop, your Taylor Swift. I'm curious, how did that did that impact your work in the business at all when country music transitioned to the more pop giddy country that's on the radio today?
Well, I mean, when I got a job offer to work for a record label in 2010, Black River Entertainment, owned by these billionaires, the Pagula family, who own the Buffalo Bills and the Sabres.
Yep.
So I went in there, and country music was starting to change a little bit. I was managing a girl named Sarah Darling there, and then I discovered a kid named Kelsey Ballerini, who's a big star today.
Yes.
I found her in a pizza place in Franklin, and anyway, that's a long story.
That's awesome.
But when Florida Georgia Line broke and the music started changing to rap in a way, and it started losing its genuine, because country music is about storytelling, always was to me. That's why I loved it so much.
Yeah.
And I was finding myself losing my passion for the new music that was coming out of Nashville. And then after I left the record company, I basically, with a New York guy, we started a crowdfunding company for young developing country artists, a crowdfunding platform for us to develop them, raise money for them, try to open the doors for them. And that's what really kind of turned me off. I did it for 4 years. But the artists, the kids today, were doing music for a different reason. They wanted to be a star rather than an artist. And, everyone was too sensitive. No one liked it. No one liked being critiqued. No one liked being given advice.
Yeah,
so I think I started.
Here's an old story.
I started aging out, basically. I started aging out of it. And that's what really kind of, and I just left the music business really this year, January, February. That was kind of it. I said, you know what, I don't want to do it no more. And I was in it for a long, long time. But yeah, the transition from the time I fell in love with country music and being a big part of the Nashville community and helping so many different labels, artists, managers, and then when it started segueing into this new bro country stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's a market for it, and it's a younger generation's music. It's not for an older demographic. And it's like every generation has its time where a new generation comes in, and the old music the kids hate.
Right.
So I mean, I love the Beatles. My parents didn't. They love Frank Sinatra. So it's a generational thing.
Sure. Yeah,
and now Nashville and the music that's being produced, there's very few artists coming out now that I really can say I appreciate and like.
You know what? I got to tell you, and I want people, listening to hear this. It's really important. What John is saying, and to some degree what Dan and I are saying, that we say, in fact, every week, is if you follow the narrative, it doesn't matter the business. It doesn't matter the industry. The narrative is the same. What was is now being turned into what is. And what is about finance, instant stardom, the microwave generation. Give it to me now. I want to be famous now. I don't want to pay my dues. I don't want to work hard. I want it, but I don't want to bust my ass for it.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that in the music business, because we've had some guests on that have told almost identical stories to the indie wrestling business today, too. A lot of these young guys coming into the wrestling schools already have their gimmick plan. They already have their finish plan. Yeah. And if you deviate from the star that they know they can be, then they don't want to hear it.
And we had that conversation, Dan, with the Doc Diamond, in fact. Now, John, I don't know if you know Doc Diamond, but
I don't.
He's been around. He's a Hall of Famer, a wrestling Hall of Famer, not a WWE guy. Thank God. But here's the deal, though. You know, he told us that people came into his school already with the mindset of, this is what I want to be. This is going to be my finishing move. This is my costume. They had everything planned out. They didn't count on one thing: learning how to work.
Right.
And that's what's missing in music. It's missing in television. It's missing in wrestling and film and every aspect of visual medium entertainment. Nobody wants to do the work anymore. One of the things Dan and I pride ourselves on this show is that we're not a wrestling show. We are historians. We are archivists of history. Wrestling is the subtext for the story that we tell. And the story that people tell on this show every week is one of a business that is both brutal and at the same time offers great redemption to the fallen. So let's talk about the rise and fall and rise again of John Arezzi. You are a guy who, a lot of people may not understand this, but if they go to a fan festival or they go to a wrestling convention or they go to an all access, what would you call that, Dan? An all access a fan convention? What would you call it?
It's a fan fest. That's
a convention, a fan
fest. Yeah. See how the simple solution eludes us? There's a good chance that you need to thank John Arezzi for that, because my understanding and to my knowledge, even my knowledge of history, John, you're the guy that brought that to us. And I got a little story to tell you. I went to, I think, one of your first fan festivals, and I'm wanting to say, I think it was in Flushing, Queens, somewhere near, I know it was near the airport, near like LaGuardia.
Across the street.
Yes, there was a place there called the Royal Royce or the
Royce Hotel.
The Royce. Thank you, the Royce Hotel. I remember. I was almost said the Rolls Royce Hotel. The Royce Hotel. I'll never forget that for a couple of reasons. I took a bus trip up. I came with other people. Long story short, it's the end of the day. We're getting ready to go. It dawns on me, I bought a gimmick. I left it inside. I run past the bus driver. Give me 5 minutes. I'll be right back. I come out. I got my gimmick, but the bus is gone.
Oh, boy.
Oh, no.
I had to wait 3 hours for my buddy to get home just so I could call him on a pay phone. No cell phones. No cell phones. Now think about this, folks. No cell phone. A pay phone. Pocket full of change. Call him up and say, dude, can you come and get me? Oh, my God. I will never forget. But I will tell you, I had the time of my fucking life. That was a
Which one was it? Who do you remember the performers that were there?
I remember. Yeah, I remember Ricky Steamboat.
That was the first one. So it was 1990. Yeah.
I remember specifically Ricky Steamboat.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know if it was his girlfriend or his wife or some significant other,
Bonnie.
but she was like stuck to him like glue.
Yeah, that was his wife.
Was that his wife?
Yeah.
I mean, if he sneezed, she bent with him. Yeah. Oh my God. But no, that was a fun time. And I remember meeting a guy who I would later see. In fact, he still does podcasts today. Sunny Beach.
Yeah, Rick.
Yeah. I see him on Monty and the Pharaoh from time to time. He's a regular guest on Monty and the Pharaoh. But go ahead, Dan. You're shaking your head. What you got?
No, I'm cracking up at your story. It's funny that
I'm old. Okay,
not that. It's the small world narrative. I mean, I didn't go to my first wrestling convention until I was older, because my parents weren't nearly as supportive of me liking wrestling as John mentioned the generational gap. My dad lived. He had to walk past Buddy Rogers' house to get to school. So when I'm sitting in front of the TV with flipping between Hulk Hogan on one channel and NWA watching Flair Steamboat on the other, it's like, oh, those guys were nothing compared to Rogers and Putski and all the guys he grew up with. But I want to ask, because you talked about, Angelo brought up these fan fests. What kind of expand on that? Like, what led to that? The idea, like, hey, we can get some wrestlers together. We do the signings. We can do the pictures. How did that come about?
Well, I had always been a fan of baseball card shows. Go to a baseball card show and you meet a ball player, you get an autograph. There's dealer tables, you're buying baseball cards. And I was like, why isn't there something like that for wrestling fans? And that's what kind of started the idea. And then I just started, thinking about it, and then started planning the first one, because I had the power of the radio station behind me. It wasn't a huge station, the first one at WNYG, but I was able to convince a few people to put a little money up as well, because I really didn't have the money to put up, and they thought it was a good
John,
idea.
You stopped there for just a second. I was going to go there with you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that's ever put one of these fan fests on, it's a costly proposition. Yeah. It's an expensive proposition. You got to have some friends with deep pockets, and somebody who believes in you enough that they're going to get a return for their investment.
Correct.
What was your pitch? What was
there were clients. They were clients. They were real estate guys. They were Italian guys. They like sports.
Our guys?
No, they weren't like that.
Boys?
No, they weren't on the boys. No.
Damn! I love having stories about.
No, but they, I talked to them. They thought it was a good idea, and we did it. I mean, we got Sting. I knew Sting was going to win the title that summer, so he was the guy that we went after as our headliner. So he got like 5,000, I believe, back in 1990, and then I got Steamboat and Terry Funk and Bruno and Cactus Jack. And John Studd, but John had gotten ill, so he couldn't make it. And then a promoter by the name of Herb Abrams reached out through Georgianne and says, I'm starting this wrestling federation. Can I launch it at your convention? And he did. So, I mean, it really was a pretty cool event. And I don't know how much money it made, that first one, because I wasn't in control of the books.
Right.
So I don't know what was made or lost. I didn't get a return from it. And that was that. It was a learning experience.
So why do it again then? Because
I loved the business, and I thought it could
even
be.
Though you realized that you took a financial beating that
I've taken risk all my life. Every day is a risk. Everything I've ever done in my life is a risk. I've never been afraid to fail. I've never been afraid to get up and start.
Oh no! I mean, failure is.
No. I mean, that's what I am. I got big balls. I don't care.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I'm
No,
just
that
going to give it a shot. And I want to please the fans. So I know how many people attended in 1990.
yeah,
And make this bigger next year. And that's when I got Ric Flair and Buddy Rogers and Luthez and Billy and Bruno and Moolah and the rest of them. So it was just something that I felt that I always wanted to give the fans that opportunity to get up close and personal with the guys.
Well, I mean, you got to have, super large cojones. And by the way, our sponsor is going to play into this. You've got to have a super large cojones to be able to pull something like this off. And you can't be afraid to fail. Absolutely. But it doesn't hurt, John, to make a couple of bucks, No,
I mean, that was always the objective. Back in the day, and I'd be the first to admit this, back in the day when I was doing Pro Wrestling Spotlight and when I was doing the conventions, I wasn't a good businessman. I was still, fairly young. I was always kind of an entrepreneurial guy, but I didn't understand what it could be and how much it could be generated. And I got worked by a lot of the guys.
Oh boy.
Who they talk to each other. Oh, you're paying him this and you're paying him that. So, I mean, that was the stuff that I couldn't handle back then because they were workers. And
brother, I got news for you. You'd be hard pressed to handle it today because there's still workers.
No, I can handle it today. Because I can handle it today because exactly. I told the Ultimate Warrior to go fuck himself and hung up on him once when he helped me up.
Yeah,
because you learn. You get an education.
John,
you get your master's
guests on the show. We've had guests on the show who told them to fuck off too. Dan, before we go any further, tell John Arezzi who our show comes courtesy of.
Well, Angelo mentioned in order to do some of those things, you got to have big cojones. Well,
big balls, John. Big
cojones, whether they're strong cojones. The key is you got to keep your cojones clean, shaven, trimmed, which you can with our friends at Manscaped.com.
Yes, sir.
Manscaped.com currently running the wondrous Lawnmower 3.0. Use promo code promo code Wrestling Future for 20% off at Manscaped.com to keep your warrior challenging cojones clean, trimmed, especially in the summer. You don't want the boys being too warm in the locker room, so you got to keep them clean.
Promo code Wrestling Future.
20% off. They're currently running the combo packs, which you can save all kinds of money on. So keep your boys trimmed, clean, good to go. Wrestling Future 20% off. Our friends at Manscaped.com.
Great
Fabulous
product.
We love our friends at Manscaped. I love those guys. Balls to the walls. That's where we're going, baby. Balls to the walls.
Sir.
So go ahead, Dan. I'm going to let you, because you always tell me that, that I hog the conversation and I interrupt you. And so here you go. Now it's just you and I.
In my defense, I only say those things because they're all true. But
not too late to get another co-host.
Oh no. But no, John, I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you mentioned it because you ran the convention where the UWF launched, and that's one of the best and simultaneously worst moments in wrestling history.
Oh my God!
Where you have a man come on stage, and now you had a crowd and a gimmick, but he promised dead performers would be there, and it's just I'm wondering how
he basically said that Bruiser Brody was going to be one of his stars, and Bruiser was murdered a year before.
Exactly. You have a defining moment. I was kind of hoping you could touch on that, being the behind the scenes. Like, how did that go over for somebody in the back?
Herb was a character. Herb, he came in and with you're talking about cojones, he had them, but he said a lot of misfactual things. But he launched the UWF at that convention, and he convinced Bruno to be involved with him, and Captain Lou, and he eventually got Andre the Giant for a little bit. I mean, so he was a nut. He was a crazy guy.
I mean, he was a nut that had, fat pockets, brother.
Yeah,
I mean,
he had wherever the money came from, whether it was his clothing stores or his ex-wife. I don't know. He had the dough, and he went through a
yeah.
lot of money.
Oh yeah.
I knew Herb really, really well, and he was a very endearing guy, although he was a lunatic.
Yeah.
And he was just one of a kind guy, and he rolled the dice, and he thought he could take over, wrestling, and thought he could put Vince out of business, and he just he never listened to advice from anybody, whether it was from Bruno or Captain Lou or any of the big quality performers that he was associated with.
Mm-hmm.
But he gave it a shot, and he's a piece of wrestling history. And that's what you got to say,
Well, it seems almost a given. It's a death knell. It really is. Think about it, Dan. It's almost a death knell to tempt that I'm going to put Vince out of business. I'm going to be bigger than Vince.
Right.
Why? Don't even try to compete with Vince. Just do a good show.
Yeah.
That's what we do here. I mean,
because if you're doing well, Vince is going to try to squash you anyway.
Right, but you have to compare.
But let it. If that's going to happen, John, let it happen organically. Don't tempt fate.
Don't pick a fight.
I mean,
thank you.
compare the fates WCW had when TNA tried to do their Monday night show versus like a Ring of Honor or New Japan, which just said we're going to put out a good product, and they don't. They're not the anti WWE. I mean, they are with their talent, but you just do a good show, and the fans will come to you.
Dan, to John's point, why pick a fight? To echo the words of the late Roddy Piper, you don't throw rocks at a man carrying a machine gun.
Right.
Why would you want to tempt your fate? Seal your fate before you ever have a chance to fight.
Exactly.
Herb Abrams was an interesting cat, though. I never knew Herb. I never met Herb, but I know people that worked for Herb. And in the interest of full disclosure, Herb Abrams Jr. is a friend of mine, not only on Facebook, but I know him. And I can't get him to come on this show and talk. He won't come on here. He doesn't want to talk about it. Why? I don't know. I think he's got a hell of a story to tell. If he chooses to tell that story, that's another story, quite frankly. But ultimately, John, why did Herb fail? Was it just insanity, or was it really just the drugs? What happened to this?
I would say it was more probably the demons that he had internally.
Yeah,
he had a lot of ambition, and he was a good salesperson. He knew how to convince people to work for him. But I think it was more of the the personal demons that did him in more than anything else.
Good, Dan.
No, I was kind of agreeing. They touched on a lot of it with the Herb Abrams episode of Dark Side of the Ring, where you had a lot of behind the scenes. I mean, really, the UWF is probably one of wrestling's biggest woulda stories.
Yeah, I was a big part of the show. I mean, I helped them with the content. I was on the show. I was on camera. I mean, it was an interesting episode. It really was. I mean,
and we should point out that's Viceland TV, Cocaine and Cowboy Boots. That's the name of the episode. Yeah,
he loved his cowboy boots.
Apparently. Apparently he did. John, one of those individuals that you are associated with throughout history is one Vincent Russo. We're not going to get too much into it because in the interest of full disclosure, once again, Vince Russo will be a guest on this show in a couple of weeks.
Bro.
Yeah, bro.
Way to God, bro.
On Dan's birthday. Now, I would love to be able to give Dan the gift of Vince Russo, but Dan wants the gift of his wife instead. I love that.
This is a gift that you should get. You should commission a painting from Vince.
I love it. Look at this shit.
Me and my nephew.
That's
awesome.
Great.
Well, if you talk about full disclosure, Angelo, I actually did talk to the wife about being on the show, as you're resident skeptic, and she told me no. So I checked with management, and my request was denied. Maybe next time.
Well, look, as long as you made a valiant effort. So now, again, I don't know. I'm gonna be honest with you, John. I don't know Vince. I've never met Vince. Okay. However, I have appeared on shows on Vince Russo's The Brand. I've been with Jessica and Rocky and Big Vito and Noel, and I've been on their shows and have contributed to their shows as a guest. But I've never spoken to Vince. I've never met him. I don't know him. I know he knows who I am. But it's going to be interesting. Tell us about this guy who is so often misunderstood. I call Vince Russo the most misunderstood guy in wrestling.
He's the most polarizing guy in wrestling.
You
love him or you hate him, and that's it. There's no in between.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You either love this guy or you just don't. And so the question is, why is that? Is he honest, or is he just so full of shit?
My business relationship with Vince only lasted 3 months.
Right.
We didn't get along. We had different visions, and I didn't like him. Today, I could say that I have a good relationship with him. It's not a business partnership or anything, but I think Vince did a lot of things that were very good, and he did a lot of things that were really shitty. I mean, not good as far as creatively, but he did some amazing things creatively as well. He was very polarizing. He was very ambitious. He wouldn't listen to people. He had his vision, and that was that. And that's why we split up after, just 3 months. But he's probably one of the most polarizing figures in the history of pro wrestling, if not the most. I think Vince, and I feel this way, I think if he had the opportunity now to do something else, or he's retiring or whatever, I mean, he's getting to that point. But I think if he could have got out of wrestling a while back and go back in it, I think he would have been happier. He's still doing his thing. I have nothing bad to say about him. I mean, I just wish him well, and I consider him.
It's interesting. I mean, I've never met the guy. I have nothing.
Well, I think you and him getting together, like doing this.
Yeah,
that could be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, he's coming on the show. Well, and in the interest of full disclosure, I've been mistaken for him publicly a few times.
Really?
More than a couple times. In fact, I will just tell everyone, again, in the interest of full disclosure, Daniel, I have a Vince Russo T-shirt.
Daniel and I have been actually, we've people have said we look like each other, except for I don't have this. I used to have that when I was younger.
But people say, well, why are you wearing a picture of yourself? That's not me.
No,
but I've literally been mistaken for it. Here's the thing, though.
But you're also a psychic. Is that real?
That's what I do. That's my shoot job. Yeah.
That's your shoot job.
Yeah. I will tell you that I work for 3-letter agencies.
Okay.
That's all I can say.
All right.
And I have a few private clients.
All righty.
But that's what I do. In fact, they told Vince about me, and they even offered to have me do a reading for him. Mm-hmm. And he said no. He wanted no part of it. He's actually coming on the show because
he's a very religious guy.
Yeah, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? So am I.
Mm-hmm.
But I call myself religious. I'm spiritual. I call myself spiritual. Because I've even said on the show that I'm not a religious guy. I'm really not.
Well, I mean, the psychic medium world, I mean, there's always been, if you're a Catholic, I mean, there are viewpoints and there are views on that
Oh, sure.
On the side,
Brother, I was raised Roman Catholic. I believe me, I know.
I was too.
Yeah.
Anybody with enough vowels in their name was raised Catholic. We all know that.
That's true. Very true.
So, what we're going to do, Dan, I'm going to give you a couple more questions, and then, well, Dan, you've been vocal. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take that back. Daniel.
Okay.
So we've talked privately about Vince Russo.
Yes,
okay?
sir.
Here's a guy that knows him.
Okay.
What's the one misnomer about Vince that you've heard, or information you've heard about Vince that you want to know whether it's true or not? The one or two pieces of information.
Okay, that's fair. I've had the communications before. It's weird. You mentioned there's no black or white. As a person, I've said positive things. He's charity work and his spiritual work and all. As a wrestling fan, I don't like what he did to the business. But I'm curious. You mentioned that he doesn't work well with others backstage. There's been stories, especially from his time in WCW, where it was almost frat boy-esque, like, somebody cut in line in front of me in catering, he's losing the title tonight. Is he the kind of guy that has those petty knee-jerk booking decisions? I
don't know. I really couldn't answer that because I don't know.
That's fair. Honestly, that's the only narrative I've ever heard that I was ever curious about.
I'll tell you, again, not knowing him, Dan, and even John, I'll say this to both of you. He seems to me, and again, I'm just a casual observer. He seems to me very much the type of my way or the highway kind of guy.
He is.
That's the impression I get.
But right. That's the way he was with me when we had the short-term.
Okay. Yeah.
There you go.
And see, the thing about it, he only cared about what was going on with Vince.
Yeah.
And we had a YouTube live thing, and we talked all of this out. But at the same time, I really wasn't that concerned about I wasn't that. He didn't know what was going on in my personal life. I didn't know what was going on in his personal life at the time. Yeah. He was losing video stores. Blockbuster was coming in. Mm-hmm. He wanted to segue into the wrestling business, and we found each other, and he kind of used me to get into the business. He put up the money for us to go to a big radio station, but it was a partnership that should have never happened because we were so different in our philosophies. Mm-hmm. And I was in the middle of covering the scandals, and he was not on board with some of the stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was just I look at it this way. Jim Cornette calls me patient zero because I was the guy that brought him in. But on the other side of it,
you gotta love Jim.
I was the guy that only lasted 3 months. And it ended.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't, he was very ambitious, and he was we got to do this, and we have to do that, and we have to do this. And I was not comfortable in the relationship at all. And he had aspirations to like shoot right to the top. And that's what he did. So out of anything that Vince Russo's done, he talked himself into the wrestling business through partnership with me.
Yeah.
He talked himself into a gig with the WWF, and he achieved some amazing things in his career with the Attitude Era. And then things went south for him, and he's never been able to get the glory that happened in those early years of Attitude Era when Vince brought him into the creative room, and he became Vince's right-hand man on the writing.
Yeah.
But he's accomplished a lot of great things. But so that's why, I mean, I have and I know there's a lot of people that hate him, and I know Cornette hates him, and I know there's so many people that hate him.
You don't say.
But there's also people that like him personally. I mean, I talked to a top performer, Hall of Fame performer this week, and we were talking about Vince a little bit because he's going to be coming on one of my shows in the future. And he says, Vince, I love the guy as a person, but his business stuff I'm not too much of a fan of.
Yeah.
because he's a grandfather. He's a family man.
Sure.
He basically and I like even the conversation I had with him when we kind of buried the hatchet a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
My nephew was the big fan of his. My nephew was the one that kind of said Russo was doing this podcast and he's saying things about your uncle, and that's when I reached out and we had this thing, and then I went to Colorado for the holidays, and I got together with Vince with my nephew, and it was a great breakfast. It was great. And he was so happy that we had.
I saw that YouTube piece that you're talking about, John.
Yeah.
As far as Vince's success, one thing I learned living in Tennessee, and I think you'll appreciate this, is that they have an expression there. Even a blind squirrel comes across an acorn every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Vince Russo's success. He got lucky. It was a moment in time. It'll never happen again. He tried to parlay a career based on something that happened in a year and a half, and he's been chasing that. It's like a guy who gets high for the first time. He's chasing that high. They call that Dan chasing the high.
Chasing the dragon, yep.
Right? And they never get that high back, that euphoria. And Vince Russo's never gotten it back since. In fact, in the process,
maybe you should discuss that with him next week.
Well, I would love to, but we're not doing a wrestling episode. We're doing a.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I'm doing a Paul McCartney is dead episode.
Yeah.
You know what though? I'm going to invite him back to talk about that.
Well, thank God Paul McCartney is alive. That's all I could say.
We think he is
allegedly. Well. Then if I can direct the conversation again, I'm curious. There's Angelo mentioned, the old sayings and all. One of the things as a history guy that's always struck me is the old story that they say Alexander the Great, he looked upon his empire and wept because there was nothing left to conquer. Everything in the world was influenced by his decision. I'm curious, looking at the landscape, if you mentioned Vince Russo, Jim Cornette, Eric Bischoff, us, everywhere you look, there's wrestling podcasts and the idea of a fan or someone who's maybe not a formally contracted performer. I mean, I started as a freelance writer and transitioned into the podcast, taking over for Angelo's former co-host, who was a good friend of mine, that, I would never have been able to do this without the foundation that your radio programs and people like you have laid for us. Do you look at the current landscape in the digital age and like appreciate the importance you've had in it, or is it one of those things where you, if not me, someone else that you don't give yourself enough credit for?
I think I was ahead of my time back then with the conventions and with bringing Lucha Libre here in '93 with Ron Scholar. I think the radio show. I think there's a lot of things that I did that were a little bit ahead of its time. So I look back at what I am today, and the only thing I am today is a historian and an analyst. I don't really give two shits about the product today. I mean, I'm not saying against it or bad. There's some things that are good and not. My role and why I am back is to share with the fans the memories of wrestling the way it used to be. And I'm launching a website in 2 or 3 weeks. I have movies that I shot at Madison Square Garden as a 13-year-old. Andre the Giant's first match there. I have 10,000 pictures. I have about 40 or 50 films from the Garden. I have audio from the 70s, 80s, 90s. I have videotapes when I was a wrestling promoter in the 90s that people have never seen before.
Yeah,
that's my role.
Yeah,
it's not a today guy. And
exactly.
what I hope, and my demographic is not a kid. My demographic is somebody 40 plus,
right,
who are going to remember the old days. And that's I know what my niche is. That's why I got a book deal. I got my book's coming out next year, and it's a story about what I did, not only in wrestling but in country music. It's a story about a guy with multiple personalities. Music guy John Alexander. Wrestling guy John Arezzi, New York Mets guy. So that's what my role is, and so I think people appreciate. I think people appreciate what I did, the ones that are still around, because I hear from them every day. My old listeners are still, a lot of them are still there. And when I came back, a lot of people thought I was dead because I was gone. I disappeared for 23 years.
Right.
So they all thought I was dead. And all of a sudden I put up a Twitter account and I start, and then Brian Last does a podcast with me, go back 30 years and listen to a show that took place 30 years ago every week, and people are loving it, and there are thousands of people listening.
Yeah. What does that tell? What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
People have a fondness for nostalgia.
It tells me people remember wrestling the way it used to fucking be when it was
great.
The
The older ones, not the kids. Right. They don't fucking know what wrestling was when Bruno.
We don't give a shit about them.
No.
We care about guys like us.
Right.
Yeah.
That's who I'm marketing to. I'm not marketing to a demographic of anybody under 40 years old.
No, I'm going to tell you something. John, I'm going to tell you something. And Dan will tell you. He's the young pup. But this young pup knows his history. Okay.
Oh, yeah, but he's in late 30s, right? Late 30s, you said?
Yeah, I turned 37 at the end of the month.
We got guys.
You're on the cusp.
the average age of our guest is 65 and up. Okay? The average age. We talk to people like Scott Casey, Johnny Mantell, oh my God, Davey O'Hannon, J.J. Dillon, Tony Villano, Dominic DiNucci, who's coming on the show next week.
Hope he's feeling well. Hope he's good, right?
Bill
Dundee. He is. Yeah, he's doing real well.
I love Dundee.
Well, I mean, we've got Dan. I mean, we have, it's like a who's who. It's like a Hall of Fame. A Mount. How do you say it, Dan? The Mount Rushmore of wrestling.
The Mount Rushmore of wrestling.
But and I've said this before. I've said it publicly, privately. Anybody who cares to listen. We don't do a wrestling podcast. We do a history show. This is history. We are preserving the history.
Right.
And what I call it preserving, protecting, and defending the history and integrity of wrestling, the way it was, the way it used to be. My company, back when, was called NCW All-Star Wrestling. And it's funny, John, because my copyrighted and trademarked slogan was the way wrestling used to be. And I'm going back 25 years. Okay? Again, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yes, sir.
That's why Dan and I do what we do. You'll notice that you and I talked the human element tonight, and that's what Dan and I do. We talked about the personal aspect. I don't give a shit about this match or that match. I could care two shits about what match or who met who, or I got my picture with this guy. I don't give a flying fuck. I care about the history that you bring. And you bring, my friend, a plethora of wrestling history. Dare I say, without John Arezzi, we probably wouldn't be here talking about John Arezzi.
That's really kind of you. I don't know how true that is, but that's kind of you.
It's quite true. Think about it. I did a radio show, you did a radio show, but you were able to do something I didn't think about doing, involving the people. Telephone calls from listeners. Who would have ever thought, especially in Philadelphia, because Philly's a tough crowd. Who'd have ever thought that somebody would actually give a shit to call in a radio station and talk about wrestling? Are you kidding me?
Right.
We fought to stay on the air every damn week because we had the Phillies. We had the Eagles, the Sixers, all like really bad sports teams that people fucking loved, okay? But then we had this underground market of wrestling fans, the silent majority that used to rise up on Saturday nights at the Spectrum, thunderous 25, 30,000 of them, After the building would fill up, they'd be outside. Somebody would run back and forth between the inside and outside, filling everybody in on what was going on. I'm sure they had guys like that. They used to call them runners. I'm sure the Garden had guys like that too. Guys that would run outside and tell everybody what was going on inside. You know, and John, you know what I'm talking about. We had guys like that.
Don't forget with the Garden, Bruno's got the record for sellouts, and that won't even be touched. And the closest, second place is still almost 100 away. That's never going to happen.
So it was a time and place that'll never happen again. He was beloved by the ethnic fans in the Northeast.
Yeah, he surely was. Brother, I'm going to tell you what. I am so thankful to have had you here for as long as we have. Go ahead and promote the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Promote Brian and Arcadian Vanguard.
Yeah, here's the platforms. The podcast is pwspod.com. Every week we go back 30 years to listen to an old Pro Wrestling Spotlight in chronological order. Have a Patreon for that, patreon.com/Arezzi. For $5 a month, you get every show unedited with commercials included. So we have 56 shows up there now. I have enough content. Brian and I will be doing Pro Wrestling Spotlight then and now for the next 4 years because I have enough radio shows for the next 4 years. I have a live show every Saturday on Facebook. It's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Live. And that could be seen at facebook.com/John Arezzi's Matt Memories. I've had Conan on with Ron Scholar. I've had Mick Foley. and each and every week it's live, and I take questions from people as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the live show. My Twitter is @John Arezzi. My Instagram is @John Arezzi. MattMemories.com is the new website. It's going to be $7.99 a month when we launch it before the end of the summer. But you could sign up now, get a lot of bonus content for free. And when this site launches, you're gonna dive back into history, and you're gonna be able to see thousands of pictures of all the big stars from the 1970s, from the WWF, NWA, all the shows.
There you go.
So, I mean, there's a lot going on. And my book comes out next year on ECW Press. It's called Matt Memories. And it's my wild ride in pro wrestling, country music, and with the Mets. So that's what I got going on. It's almost a full-time gig for me again.
You did no shit.
Yeah, I left the music business. I'm winding down to retirement. I've come 360. I started in pro wrestling, and this is where I'm going to end.
There you go. Beautiful.
What's old is new again.
Absolutely.
And I thank you guys for thank you for inviting me on tonight.
Oh, this was an honor.
Thank you for accepting. We'd love to have you back too. Love to have you back. I wish we had more time.
No,
we only have an hour and a half show. John, thank you so much. We're definitely going to call upon you to join us again.
All right. Best of luck to you guys.
Thank you so much. Take care, John. John Arezzi, everyone. All right, Dan, just you and me.
What a great interview.
Just you and I, you know, it's normally we've got 5 windows open here with, you know.
I take nothing away from some of our rotating panelists, but the conversation flows smoother with less voices.
I know. I don't know what to do. I'd like, it was always, you know, I don't know what to do. Like if Mike Messier is not promoting something. Mike is always promoting something. You know, I can't promote MikeMessier.com. Mikey's not here.
Oh, you could still give him a shout out.
Well, I can still give him a shout out, like, you know,
like you just did.
Maybe, yeah, here you go. Yeah, well, just for, you know, because I'm feeling sentimental tonight. For all your Mike Messier wants, needs, and desires. If his name was a website, it would be MikeMessier.com. Go see him at MikeMessier.com. What's his name? Mike Messier. All right, Mikey, get well. We hope that your hernia or your hemorrhoids or both are not flaring up on you.
Thought we'd go the whole show without another one of those.
I know. I can't help it. Shades of Andrew Anderson.
Jeez.
Oh, by the way, that was a great show. Andrew's going to come back too. So what do you got to promote? Anything going on with Dan?
Well, we've got a couple of shows coming up on the YouTube channel. Obviously, last episode we've got a new series, Cut a Promo with the Bearded Wonder, Jason Tuttle, and WWE Superstar Rico. That first episode posted this week, so check that out.
Great episode too.
Yes,
really
sir.
was.
We've got more of Mikey's life lessons, and we've got
life
a couple
lessons with Mike Messier.
Yep.
I can't believe I said it again, Mike Messier. Oh, and the other thing, so Mike Messier's Wrestle Ride.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. You know. Also, Mike Messier's films and documentaries.
Yeah, plenty of good content.
Mike Messier channel.com part 2. No.
Yeah, we've got plenty of good content. Obviously on the YouTube page.
I wanted to ask you, Dan, what's going on with the Refs Roundtable? When's the next roundtable coming out?
We've got. Well, I had one set up for because I'll be in and out the next couple weeks. So I've got one in the can ready to go. We've got 2 more coming up in the next week. Obviously, with Jason filming his new show, our usual panel, we went in which different direction. But we'll be back next week with new content. We've got a couple of indie guys talking. We've reached out to a couple of wrestlers. We've got obviously from last week, and we've got again continuing to hunt down, try and do the CTE special. That's a huge story.
Little Birdie told me, Dan, that we may have a special show on the paranormal with some guys from the Ghost Hunters.
Yes, I was going to mention that. We've got the television show Ghost Hunters. We're going to have a couple of surprise call-ins for that. That's going to be one of our regular shows. Pulling up all the information now. I apologize. I had the notes for our upcoming shows, so I closed the window. But obviously, like I mentioned, our good friend Ray Savino, he's a friend of mine. He was a friend of Jeff Robinson's, and he's going to be on doing discussing paranormal. And we're going to be joined by, as of now, we've got call-ins from Daryl Marston and Mustafa Gadalori, who's they're both from the television show Ghost Hunters.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting on my end. I already discussed that they've got some new stuff coming up. Obviously, their big thing now is they run a series of public ghost hunts, which are just picking up now as COVID's allowing people to be in groups. It's going to be interesting because that's going to be a discussion from the perspective of, again, you talk about the people side, because the
thing about the ghost hunts that's interesting, Dan, is that because these ghost hunting groups are generally smaller clustered groups anyway, 4 to 6 people, generally no more than 4 or 5.
Yes, sir.
They have a little bit more leeway, a little bit more accessibility than perhaps a group of 10, 15, or 20, a larger group.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting. I would love to see, a small group of maybe, 4 or 5 people, investigate or do a haunt. I would love to be able to present that, in fact, as a special episode on the show. I would love to be able to do a live. What do you think about that? Doing like a live ghost hunt.
I will say that's an interesting thought. The problem is going to be because obviously you have people in different states. But the other problem too is anybody. No offense to our platforms, but live streaming on YouTube is not easy. YouTube has taken their time to catch up. Especially their big push recently has been for gaming. They're trying to catch up with companies like Twitch, but live streaming on YouTube is a little difficult. As far as our main,
you have a bearded wonder,
that is true. Yes,
that's
sir.
Pretty good that way. So we're going to have to pick his brain a little.
Yes, sir. And well, we've got next week. We've got the discussion on the territory days on the 21st, July 21st. You mentioned that. Yes. That's going to be a great show. July 23rd, our friend Baby Doll's coming back.
Baby Doll, yes.
So anybody who the first time we talked to her and anybody who's ever heard her talk, that's a great interview altogether.
Yeah.
On the 28th is your special show with the Sage Quay and Vince Russo discussing whether or not the Whether or not the man who identifies himself as Paul McCartney is who he says he is, that should be interesting.
We will find out.
And then coming up the first week of August, August 4th is going to be our paranormal show, and August 6th is going to be part 3 with Bill Dundee, who's obviously, I mean, you talk about somebody who knows some stories.
Oh boy.
But we've got a lot of good stuff coming up.
10-parter with Bill and never get the same story twice.
Absolutely.
I love Bill. I love Bill.
Bill reminded me, doing the interviews with Bill Dundee reminded me of the 2 parts we did with Sam Houston, where you can just, a kernel of story can turn into a lifetime of memories from one question. God, yeah. And next thing you know, you've been talking for 2 hours and I got to 3 questions on my paper. That's not a criticism of how much he talks. It's a compliment to the depth of the stories he can tell.
Exactly. Exactly. People don't understand that. They say, "Oh, I wish you'd ask more questions." Why?
Right.
Why?
Well, I mean, you remember our was a part 2 with Sam Houston. It was an hour and 10 minutes into the show before anybody got a word in, because it was just one story to the other, to topic
for
to topic,
which
and
you were very grateful.
Exactly, and that's the people side of things that we do. Hey now, but I mean, as far as our platforms,
brutal on me, brother. You're really
as far as our platforms, we're obviously on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We also have the closed Facebook group, Wrestling with the Future Podcast. We're on Twitter at Wrestling Future. That's no G, Wrestling Future. You and I are both on Twitter. I'm at the man_WWTF.
Mm-hmm.
And your Twitter handle is Psychic Medium Angelo?
At Psychic Angelo on Twitter.
Psychic Angelo.
Yep. Find me on Facebook. I'm really easy to find. At Psychic Angelo.
There you go.
Did you do our Instagram at Wrestling with the Future on Instagram?
Yep. Yes, sir. I forgot about it. That's our relatively new platform, Wrestling Future Instagram.
Yeah, we got little video clips up there. We've got photos. We've got our guest list up there. If you want to see who's been here, who's coming, we got our guest list up there. We got. I'm adding. It's a slow process because they just wanted me. I don't have a team like John does. God bless him. So I have to do old school, one at a time,
Right.
I need about 5 more Jason, the Bearded Wonders, loading everything.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be a wonder if there was too many of you.
I know. I tell you what, that man has been amazing.
I'm
hell of a website he's putting together for us too.
Oh yes, and as long as Jason and I have been friends for a long time, and I'm glad he became a part of this. But for those obviously on the podcast side, anywhere podcasts are, for those on YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Buy the t-shirts. And
I wanted to tell you, we picked up a couple of stations.
Here we go.
Yeah, I got to find out. I didn't even know. I just found out today. We picked up a couple of stations, and I'm going to tell you who they are here. Here we go. Here we go. We are on Podtail. We are on Backtrack.fm.
Nice.
We are now on Chartable.com.
Okay.
We are on, where else do we? I just saw it. Here we go. And where was that other one? I just saw it. Oh, for God's sakes. Chartable, Backtracks, Podtail. And I had 4, but those are the 3 that.
That's fair.
I forgot where the hell I put the other one at. Anyway,
a bit of a pat on the back, shout out to ourselves. The reason our number of stations picking us up continues to expand. As of last month, we had exceeded 2 million downloads on the Central show, which is impressive. We've touched on before, the average lifespan of a pro wrestling podcast is about 3 episodes. We were over 100 and more than 2 million downloads. And the innovator of really without him, we wouldn't have wrestling podcasts. Was just on the show.
And you know what? He's real humble about it too, Jeff. You know what I mean? Oh God, please! Oh my God! I almost said Jeff. Holy smokes!
Well,
wow. I gotta tell you, Dan. I've been thinking about him a lot lately.
Yeah, mixing us up. I'm sure he'd get a kick out of that.
Yeah, he's probably pissed on himself laughing. But I've been thinking about him a lot lately. I've been seeing his pictures come up in Facebook. You know, his mother and sister are on Facebook, and occasionally they'll like something that I put up there, and then it says Jeff. Oh, anyway. Well, Jeff, we love you. We miss you, brother. Man.
Yes, sir.
So anyway, Dan, I tell you what, I as far as I'm concerned, Jeff is here anyway because he's the one that picked you.
Absolutely.
For Dan the Man, I'm still Psychic Angelo. Little darker, little whiter, still the same guy. We appreciate everything you've done for us, folks. We'll be here next week, same time, same podcast channel. I'm really screwed myself up with that one, boy. I tell you, my head's all screwed. You're gonna have to say goodbye to us.
All right. Well, like I said, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. We've said a lot, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody. Happy wrestling. Bye-bye.